Hello everyone, my name is Alyssa Salas from Grand Canyon University, and today I will be discussing English language education in the state of Arizona. To begin, let's discuss what English learners are. English learners are students whose primary language is anything other than English, and they have difficulty speaking, writing, reading, and comprehending English, so much so that it provides difficulty in the classroom and prevents them from success. Now, let's look at Arizona's English learner demographics. There are 103,318 total students in Arizona who are enrolled in English language services, with the percent in the K-12 population being 9.2, as well as the top 5 languages spoken being Spanish and Spanish from Spain, Arabic, Swahili, Navajo, and Vietnamese. Now let's look at structured English immersion. Structured English immersion is the teaching of the English language to non-proficient English speakers, typically at an accelerated rate, and it encompasses many models that vary state by state because of their legal requirements from their educational laws. Similarly, how these models are applied also vary because based on the school size, location, grade levels, the amount of English language learners, and the percentage of English language learners. If we compare SEI to sheltered English instruction, SEI focuses on teaching the English language as a whole, while sheltered English instruction is where students are taught English alongside general education content, like mathematics, science, or social studies. Arizona's language development approach is a general understanding that English language learners are valuable and play an active and important role for all multilingual learners to be successful in Arizona. Its 4 main principles, first, are asset-based behaviors and expectations, which recognizes that multilingualism and biliteracy are assets, and leveraging these assets allows for greater opportunities to show mastery, encourage self-recognition, meet students' needs as a whole, and enforce a growth mindset. Next is the integrated instruction in disciplinary language and content, where general education standards are integrated with English language proficiency standards to help differentiate, scaffold, and model instruction while supporting and encouraging students. The third principle is targeted and explicit language instruction, where general education content and practices are integrated with language instruction to emphasize opportunities of understanding and autonomy across all disciplinaries in their grade level, by implementing academic language and incorporating culturally and linguistically appropriate materials and instruction. The last principle is assessment, monitoring, and feedback, where instruction is informed by aligning to state English proficiency standards, using both formative and summative assessments, especially for quick data, analytical rubrics, and using student progression. Lastly, on this slide, I'd like to discuss the research surrounding English language learners, which, if educators follow the 4 main principles, it's been shown that students' confidence will increase, positively affecting their belief in themselves for learning a new language. Their voice and self-determination is advanced to understand content and language successfully, and they learn how to set effective goals and know how to measure and evaluate their own progress to meet those goals. Now let's discuss student agency. Student agency is their ability to advocate for themselves by making self-directed, self-determined decisions while being cognizant of their assets and capabilities, which is important because it affects the instruction of ELLs, supports self-determination, emphasizes one's voice, and increases confidence. When educators take student agency into account when planning and implementing instruction, there are more opportunities for students to be active in the learning process, which helps develop the deeper thinking and taking a more autonomous role, meaning students are intrinsically motivated to be successful and meet their goals. It is also important to foster agency because it introduces students to learning how to believe in themselves and their capabilities, take responsibility for their actions, feel like they belong to help them become confident in their choices and abilities, help them think forward to the future and plan for their life, and agency can affect one's social behavior by increasing leadership traits and their acting on behalf of others. Now that we know what SEI is, there are 4 models I would like to discuss. First, the newcomer model, which is for recently arrived immigrants who struggle with English, and it teaches English and academic content in their primary language outside of content area classes, with it typically lasting 2 years or less before they are transitioned to general education classes, while still receiving English language support if needed. And their classes are made up of their ELL peers, with the goal being to advance English language proficiency and skills at the same time academic content is taught. The pull-out method focuses on students learning English for a set amount of time during the day, where they are pulled out of their general education classes, which is typically seen in elementary schools. And sadly, this does disrupt their school day because they're pulled out of general education classes to participate in these support services. The 2-hour model requires elementary students to have 120 minutes per day and 600 minutes per week of targeted instruction, and secondary students must have 100 minutes per day and 500 minutes per week, with these minutes not having to be consecutive throughout the day. This model doesn't require students to miss general education classes, but integrated instruction will take place in a minimum of one general education class with their non-ELL peers, which focuses on that general education class's standards and requires a certain number of minutes set by the local education agency. The last model is the 50-50 dual language immersion, where students receive 50% general education content taught in English and 50% to be taught in another language, often referred to as the partner language, which is known to help make connections between both languages. And, similar to the 2-hour model, students must have a certain number of minutes of English language instruction, with elementary students needing 90 minutes per day and 450 minutes per week, and secondary students needing 75 minutes per day and 375 minutes per week. This model also focuses on an integration of general education standards and English proficiency standards together. Although this slide seems to have a lot of information, the process to determine if a student is eligible for EL programs is rather straightforward. First, a home language survey will be given to students to identify if they primarily speak a language other than English at home. If so, they will then be assessed through the ESL test, which will tell us if the student is initial English fluent proficient, meaning they don't need services, or if they are pre-emergent, emergent basic, or emergent intermediate, meaning they do qualify for English language services. Next, parents will be notified, and we need to get their consent for students to be placed in the EL program. But parents can choose to not have their student enrolled if they follow one of the 3 waivers to exempt them from EL service participation. Them withdrawing their student would also require them to fill out paperwork, with the understanding that they will be consulted of alternate options and notified of new models or modified programs. These students and initial English fluent proficient students can still receive compensatory instruction on an as-needed basis. Then, students will be re-evaluated annually, even if parents have withdrawn them, which will take place at the end of the year and tell us if they need to continue EL services or if they are proficient enough to be reclassified and placed into general education classes, with monitoring over the next 2 years after reclassification. There are universal accommodations available to English learners for the ESL test. Universal accommodations that are available to them are being seated in special furniture or in a special location in the testing room, being tested in small group or one-on-one settings, using devices like glasses, contacts, magnification, line readers, hearing aids, and hearing assistive technology to see and hear the test, having scripted directions repeated as needed, having the test administered by a familiar test administrator, and using a grip or special pencil to help hold and write. Parents and guardians have rights to their students receiving EL services, such as being notified annually if their student is going to be receiving services. They can choose to opt out of them. Spec Ed evaluations can be requested at any time. Parents must be provided with documentation regarding their students' education that is translated into a language they understand, as well as schools must communicate with parents in a language they understand through services they provide. These are my references. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you so much.